Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance and interest to working Rhode Islanders. We hope you enjoy this evening's edition.
Welcome to this week's edition of Labor Vision, where on a regular basis we engage in a discussion with local elected officials talking about issues important to working families. My name's Jim Parisi, and I'm pleased this week to be joined with Representative Rob Da Silva. Rob is in his third year, his second term, representing the 63rd District, which spans both East Providence and Pawtucket. I understand you're a Pawtucket police officer?
Yes, I am, Jim. And first of all, let me thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. And yes, I am with the Pawtucket Police Department, and I've been there 17 years. This is my second term now as a state representative, and I'm very happy to be representing the people of East Providence and Pawtucket.
That's terrific. You serve on the House Labor Committee, and we wanted to talk to you today about a couple of labor issues as it relates to plant closings, closings of business, and also the issue of biweekly pay. But before we get into those issues, how'd you get involved in politics?
Well, Jim, early on, I've always been following what's going on around the state politically and in my community especially, and I was very involved with many different organizations in East Providence, and became involved in some of the other candidates' campaigns, and I saw a need to have somebody who's going to represent the working man in our community, and I thought I fit the bill. I mean, my background is my parents immigrated to this country. They worked in factory jobs. My father working for Leviton Manufacturing. Unfortunately, that's moved out. And my mother worked for Davol Manufacturing. Two fantastic plants. And I knew and I know what it is to work hard and to need that type of representation where you're going to be looking out for the working man.
Yeah, and now that you've been in the Rhode Island General Assembly for a couple of years, you've had an opportunity to weigh in on a lot of issues important to working men and women, haven't you?
I certainly have, and it's been a tremendous learning experience. It's been very humbling, to hear from everyday people who have real problems. These are issues that are affecting them in so many different ways, and a lot of them have been the working man, especially in the economy that we're facing right now. I've received many calls from people looking to get help with unemployment benefits and other calls relating to plant closings and things of that nature.
Sure. I've been a lobbyist up in the Rhode Island Assembly for 17 years now for the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals. And I think every year I've been up there, there's been legislation introduced on biweekly pay. Now, it's not an issue that I deal with, based on the nature of the people I represent, but I wanted to ask you some of your initial thoughts about the biweekly pay legislation. I know there was a hearing recently by a bill that Representative Serpa put in that would erase this, the ability of folks to get paid on a weekly basis and would allow private sector workers to pay people every other week. So what does the bill do, and what's the scope of the bill? Why don't we start with that?
Well, what the bill aims to do is to allow employers to pay their employees on a biweekly basis. All right? Instead of getting paid at the end of the week on a weekly basis, you're going to have to wait for your paycheck that extra week. And we know how difficult things are with the economy, and for working families especially. They go on, a lot of families live on a week-to-week, paycheck-to-paycheck basis. And I think when you're looking at expanding that and making them wait an extra week, it's going to hurt a lot of working families.
Now, there's some employers in Rhode Island that currently don't have to pay weekly. They can pay biweekly. Some of the examples I'm aware of are government employees, for example, state workers and teachers whom we represent in my union. They get paid every other week. Are there other folks who get paid every other week in Rhode Island already?
I understand that there are some exemptions currently outlined. I think libraries are one of the exemptions. There's also and it's very timely. I received a phone call and I spoke to a former employee of Advanced Solutions for Tomorrow. I don't know if I'm sure everyone is familiar with that plant that closed in Middletown due to some corruption and some illegal activity that was going on.
This is the defense industry plant that just closed a couple of weeks ago after that scandal about the bribery by the owners, right?
That is correct. And I received a call, communication from an employee there. And what was happening is that particular plant was paying their employees on a bi-weekly basis, which I questioned the individual how they were able to do that, and he told me that they were headquarters their headquarters outside of the state of Rhode Island, so their headquarters is not located here. Somehow their employees are getting paid on a bi-weekly basis. Well, he's out 2 weeks' pay right now, and so is every other employee at that facility. And he was reaching out for some help or some guidance. He realized that I had put in some legislation relating to, early warning and letting employees know when they're going to be closing plants down. So he wanted some guidance and some help with that situation.
So one of the issues with the biweekly pay is what happens if an employer shuts down. And if an employer goes out of business, people are left holding the bag, and then you have workers who would be missing 2 weeks of pay as opposed to just missing 1 week of pay if they were getting paid on a weekly basis. Is that one of the arguments that was offered?
That is an argument. I mean, we had a situation a couple of years back in East Providence, the Calibri Group. 280 employees were affected by the closing. The plant closed without giving them any foreknotice. Employees showed up. They were out 1 week's pay.
What kind of business was that, and
it was
where was it located?
It was located in East Providence on Waterman Avenue, and they were involved in manufacturing and some of the lighters and things of that nature. It was all, most of the employees, because I met with a lot of them, hard-working family people who were left holding the bag. They had 1 whole week of pay coming to them, and they weren't paid as they were supposed to be paid. And from what I understand, and I learned this, and it's a learning process for me too, is that in the pecking order, when you have a receivership, they're placed at the bottom. All the other creditors come first, and the employees, they're at the bottom of the list, which to me I found incredible.
And that's bankruptcy law, which goes beyond just the state of Rhode Island. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And my concern was, of course, for the working families, for those employees who were left holding the bag. But that was 1 week's pay. Now you can compound that problem a lot more by making that 2 weeks' pay. And that's one of the issues. That's one of the concerns I have with the legislation.
What are some of the other issues that were raised during the bill hearing on biweekly pay from people who supported it?
Well, the people who support it, and I can understand where they're coming from, they have to pay, a lot of these companies have to pay a payroll company to send out the checks on a weekly basis. And I guess there's a cost associated with that, of course. They're saying that they'd be able to save half that cost if they were to go to a biweekly. Instead of having to pay, let's say, $5,000, they pay $2,500 a year. So yes, and I'm all in favor of anything that's going to make it better for business, anything that's going to make it easier to do business in Rhode Island. However, there's got to be something in there to protect the employee. Whatever piece, it's got to be a give and take. Whatever legislation ends up coming out of that committee, it's got to be something in place that's going to protect that employee so he doesn't get held holding the bag.
Did Representative Serpa's bill require businesses to post a bond to cover payroll in case they went out of business, for example?
It did not. It did not. And that's actually something, I mean, that probably would be something to be looked at. I don't know if business would be in favor of something like that, but it's something that you need to balance both sides of the equation. It's not just always, let's do everything we can for business. What about those people who are working to feed their families and they depend on this job, and all of a sudden they're shut down and you've got nothing. You got nothing. You're holding the bag for 2 weeks of pay.
So it was certain businesses that were there supporting the Serpa legislation this year?
There were special interest groups representing, the business industry, the business sector.
Were there any groups representing working people that were supporting biweekly pay?
No, I didn't see any groups. Actually, the groups representing working people were there, in opposition to it.
Yeah, I understand the AFL-CIO has consistently opposed biweekly pay, and George Nee testified at the hearing. What kinds of things was he saying to you that resonated as far as why biweekly pay is not the way to go?
Well, a lot of what I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's people people are having a hard enough time meeting their financial demands on a week-to-week basis. Now, when you compound that by now making a working family have to wait 2 weeks to get paid, you're going to compound the problem. It's hard enough meeting your needs now on a week-to-week basis, never mind when you're dealing with a bi-weekly basis. That was one of his concerns. You have another concern was the whole situation with you know, what happens in situations when a plant closes and you're left, you know, now you're left owing the employee 2 weeks worth of pay instead of 1 week.
I imagine if workers didn't have their paycheck on a regular basis, they'd be spending less money that second week waiting for the pay. That can't be good for small businesses in our neighborhoods, can it?
Well, I'd have to agree with that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The bill's been introduced consistently, and the proponents talk about Rhode Island, I believe, being the only state that doesn't have.
They were saying the only state,
pay?
but I think in testimony there were a couple of other states somewhere that also don't have that situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
what do you think the prospects are for this legislation this year? Do you think there's a big push to make biweekly pay happen?
there certainly is a push because, like I said, this is my 3rd year up there. My first 2 years I didn't hear much on the topic, and this year I've been hearing quite a bit about it. So I'm believing that this year you're going to see something probably come out, but I'm not speaking for the committee as a whole or the chairwoman. I'm just speaking from what I'm hearing up there. So whatever comes out, hopefully it's going to be something that's fair to the working person and to business.
And after the committee had the hearing, why don't you describe to the viewers what the process is? You didn't vote on the bill right then and there, did you?
No, generally what happens is we take testimony and then we hold the bill for further study. And the reason for that is sometimes there's input from different people who have interest in it that might make the bill better. And you don't want to vote on just the initial bill. A lot of times that's like a rough draft. And you want to kind of digest it and see what you can do to make it fine-tune it and make it a better bill. So at this point, the speaker or somebody in the leadership will take a look at it with input from the committee, try to make it a better bill, if that's the direction you want to go with, if that's the direction they're going to take it in, and then it would come back to a vote from the committee.
And what time of year would that normally happen?
It's speculation. I wouldn't be able to say exactly when.
Okay, but you think it'll be maybe March or April? It won't be May or June at the end, do you think?
I really don't know. I know that Speaker Fox is trying to do things differently, and he's working hard to make this a smoother process. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure if it's a bill that he wants to support, I don't think he's going to make it like in years past. You hold it until June, and then you vote on it on the budget day, which sometimes a lot of legislation gets pushed through without proper vetting in that regard. But I think Speaker Fox is definitely looking at doing things a little bit differently.
Okay. And have you heard a push against it from either yourself or what your colleagues on the Labor Committee are saying? I know you said that there's a push for it. Are you getting the opposite view from people as well?
Yeah, there are people on that committee who have the same opinion that I do. That it's something that needs to be properly balanced. Whatever comes out of this legislation, it has to be balanced. Not only the needs of business, which I understand where they're coming from, and I understand if we're gonna be competitive with other states, we wanna make things friendly to business. At the same time, though, you have to look at the person who makes the people who make business successful are their workers, and you want to protect those people. And like you mentioned earlier, these people are receiving their money on a week-to-week basis. They're spending all of their money on a week-to-week basis on groceries and other needs that the family to meet the needs of the family. To make them wait that extra week, I don't know if many of these families are going to be able to survive. So.
Yeah, and particularly in light of the fact that it was just revealed that 1 of 7 Rhode Islanders is getting assistance just for food. It really shows you that there are a large number of people who really don't have a lot of money to float them from one paycheck to another if you double that amount of time.
And that's how I'm feeling about the situation at this moment.
Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned the plant closure of the Colibri plant, in your neck of the woods in East Providence. Did that fact spur you to work on some legislation?
It certainly did. I thought it was a terrible thing that happened in East Providence. When they shut the plant down, those people showed up, 280 people showed up to work, and the doors were shut. There was no forewarning. So what ended up happening is Patrick Quinn and Stan Israel from SEIU reached out to me, and they introduced me to a lot of the employees there, and asked if I'd be interested in trying to push through some legislation that would help them out.
Were the members who worked over at the Clevery plant unionized? Was it a unionized plant?
I don't believe they were, no. But Patrick and his organization were standing up for them.
This is just the labor movement standing up for working people, whether they're paying dues or not.
That's right. That's right. And we had an opportunity to meet with them. And we ended up crafting some legislation called the Rhode Island Worker Protection and Job Loss Notification Act. And basically what that does, it mirrors the Federal WARN Act. There's a federal law now that requires employers to give their employees a certain amount of notification before they lay them off or close it, if it's going to be a mass layoff or a plant closing.
So not just a couple of people getting laid off, the federal law isn't triggered, it's when a vast majority of the workers are getting laid off that the federal requirement kicks in that you have to give people some notice that it's coming.
Exactly, exactly. And what my bill does, but the problem is if there's a violation of that WARN Act, the only recourse that the workers have is to go to federal court. There's no recourse in state court. So we looked at how can we, as a state, protect our workers? How can we put something in place to give them some type of recourse? And so we crafted this state legislation that would, in effect, apply to any company with 75 or more employees. The federal law applies to a company with 100 or more employees. And interestingly enough, when I was speaking to that employee from Advanced Solutions for Tomorrow, the military contractor, he told me that he'd been in contact with different attorneys and people regarding the federal WARN Act, but because that plant employed 90 employees and not 100, they may not be covered under the WARN Act. So he's getting it from all different angles.
He's frustrated.
He's frustrated, and he has no recourse statewide.
But if your bill had been enacted in years past, with your threshold of 75, it would have covered that defense contractor closing out on Aquidneck Island, right?
It certainly would. It certainly would. And once again, this bill would serve nothing more than to protect the working man and woman. Okay, by giving them the adequate notification, you're talking about 60 days notification, so that they know what they're going to do, what's the next step in their lives. You know, what are they going to do next? To have it go down the way it was at Clevery, and with this particular situation here at AST, to have employees show up at the door and the door is shut, it's not fair to those loyal employees who've been there. Some of them had been there for 20, 25 years, working all their lives for this particular company, and now a venture capitalist organization takes it over, and all they care about is liquidating the money in the plant, and then they don't care about the employees.
Selling the equipment, and that was the end of it.
That's it.
There must have been some husband-wives or different people within a family affected by that Clevery closing,
yes, there
right?
was. Yes, there was. And imagine showing up. I can't even imagine this, because we know that the work market, I mean, the employment market is not the best here in Rhode Island. There's not much out there. But when you've been depending on a certain organization to be working there for them for 20, 25, 30 years, and you know nothing else but this plant, and you show up and your door's shut, where's the courtesy of giving these people a heads up to let them know, hey, look, here's what's happening, we may be shutting down, prepare yourselves, get your finances in order, catch up on your bills, start looking for a job, prepare a resume, something like that. I mean, to me, it's terribly unfair to the worker.
And your bill wouldn't stop a layoff or a plant closing. It would just give people a heads up, some advance notice. Right.
It would require them to get a heads up. It also would put in place with the Department of Labor and Training a special response task force that would work with the company to help the company find other sources of revenue, to help them avoid the layoffs. So there'd be something in place where they'd be able to work with DLT to get the company on its feet.
So if that bill were in place, state government would have a role in avoiding job loss by working with these companies that are in danger of closing.
Exactly. And the other thing it would do, Jim, is right now, the employee, the way it happens now, you show up, the door's shut, you're laid off. Now you have to go file for unemployment benefits, you have to wait. With this system in place, the employee would get advance notice. Now they can start preparing the paperwork they need to with DLT, so the minute that they are laid off, they can start collecting their benefits. They don't have to wait 2 or 3 months before they start collecting their unemployment benefits.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of positives for this bill, but I imagine there was someone opposed to it. There always is when legislation introduced in the State House. Tell me about the opposition.
Well, once again, and not to be negative on, I understand that there's people at the State House representing different interests, but some of the people in representing business interests feel that it may be a negative for business in Rhode Island, and that it would cause business to avoid Rhode Island. And I don't think that's the case. I think if you put something in place that's going to help business to avert laying people off, and you put something in place that's going to help them to take care of their employees who helped them be successful in the first place, you'd want something like that. You'd want to look forward to something like that. Mm-hmm. And there are other states. We're not the first state to come up with something like this. There are other states in the nation that have the act in place, and it's been working for them.
So not just proposed, but it's been enacted in some other states.
That's right.
Any of our close neighbors?
I think New Jersey may have something like that, and I wouldn't be able to rattle off all the names right now.
Okay. You haven't had a hearing on this bill yet, have you?
We had a hearing. Well, this is my third time introducing it. But we had scheduled it for a hearing, but I wanted to sit down and talk with Charlie Fogarty from DLT and run things by him to get his input, because it really has to be, we need cooperation from everybody. Charlie
Fogarty is the new director of the Department of Labor and Training. Had the Department of Labor and Training taken a position on the bill in the last 2 years under the Cherry administration?
Yes, they had. They were actually in support of it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we have a new administration in place, and I'm thinking that if we could sit down with them and have them take a look at it and have them be part of the solution, maybe we can get this thing passed. Okay. And just wanted to mention also that Senator Frank DeVol on the Senate side has introduced the mirror legislation. So we have it introduced on both sides, and hopefully we can get this thing to go through.
Had he done that in prior years, or is this the first year that he's introducing a Senate version?
I believe he has, yes.
Okay. And in terms of proponents, other than than the folks who've already been affected, who else is speaking out on this issue?
It's anybody who has interest of the worker. I mean, we've spoken to a lot of different organizations who are in support of it. So, well, hopefully, I'm going to try to see if we can get some of these advanced solutions for tomorrow employees who were affected by their closing to come up and speak in favor of it. I know that we've had a great group of people from Calibri come up and speak. So if we can get some of these affected employees, so people can hear from them, how these things affect them personally.
I know you had said that the Calibri workers, their lost wages were at the bottom of the pecking order as far as bankruptcy. Did they ever get their money as far as payment? Did you ever get a follow-up on that?
I don't know the follow-up on that yet. And actually, I'm sure I'll be finding out soon enough when I sit down and speak with them again. So, but I don't know where that stands right now.
Okay. I know, other than those two issues, and particularly the issue of the plant closing, your orientation is towards avoiding, more job loss. But Rhode Island is plagued with a very high unemployment rate, and we've had one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. What things do you think the Assembly is really focusing on this year as it relates to making our economy stronger? Does anything come to mind?
One of the things that I'm fortunate to be involved with right now is the Port Commission, and we are still working on trying to make Quonset and Davisville and the ports working together with Providence and East Providence, make that an economic engine for the state. So that's one area where we can start working on and hopefully make that something that's going to be viable for many years to come. Other areas, I mean, the bottom line is when you have these companies that have been around for 20, 30 years and they're moving overseas because they want to make more money or save money on paying their employees, it's hard to turn that around. I mean, I'm at a loss sometimes on how do we bring these companies back. Places like Leviton Manufacturing, where my father worked for 30 some odd years, he was able to raise 3 children You know, here's a guy who came from another country, didn't speak a lick of English, was able to work at this factory represented by IBEW. And then my mother, who was working at Davor, which was a great factory, Davor Manufacturing. And these companies leave because they want to avoid paying their employees top dollar or you know, or decent living wages, and that troubles me. Quite interesting. During one of the recent hearings, there's a lot of people out there that are just, they're anti-worker, anti-labor, and they get up there and they speak that they're in favor of business, but it was interesting, one individual gets up there and he starts speaking how he worked for a particular plant that never had union. He was very proud of that. Our people were never organized. They came in there and they tried to organize. We were never organized. And you know, there was another plant down the street and they were union, they were organized, but we always paid our employees more than that plant down the street. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, do you think that plant down the street being organized and having a collective bargaining agreement and having somebody looking out for the employees, do you think that may have affected your situation? Because now you're competing with that. So in effect, whether or not you have an organized shop or not, the organized shop is going to improve the unorganized shop and their situation. And it was interesting to hear this person who was speaking against organized labor, how he was benefiting directly from organized labor indirectly. And it amazes me how people fail to recognize the benefits of having people looking out for the worker and having a voice. And it was kind of a funny thing to have him say that and not realize what he was saying.
Yeah. I'm often set back by how there are not a lot of people who are really fighting for the middle class in our General Assembly sometimes, and middle class jobs and middle class opportunities that we're all looking for. Do you think really working on a port is a way that we can turn our state around? Is there enough potential growth in Quonset, working with the other ports that you mentioned in Providence and East Providence, to really make this state look different, feel different, or at least have more economic opportunities so that our young people can find good paying jobs?
I certainly think so, and I think when I look at East Providence, well, let's look at the ports, for instance. Right now, what's happening in Quonset is fantastic. I mean, they're bringing in a lot of different business into Quonset.
There's a lot of jobs there already,
There's a lot of jobs there. They're doing a fantastic job. There's no critique of what's going on in Quonset. But I think we can go further. We can do more. We could make Rhode Island a hub. I mean, we have everything going for us as far as access to rails, air, water. You've got, you know, the Industrial Revolution was built around waterways, and Rhode Island is the perfect situation. You've got all this stuff together, and if we focus our attention and making this go in the right direction, I think all these communities are going to benefit. Providence, Quonset, East Providence, and those are blue collar work. Those are working jobs. That's middle class jobs, high paying middle class jobs that we're looking at bringing in, and hopefully we can look at developing. Now, I don't know. This is my first year on that Port Commission, so I'm eager to get my feet wet, let's say, and see where we can take this.
I know the state, including its taxpayers, have already invested a lot of money in those capital improvements you just mentioned. I mean, we've fixed road access. We've fixed rails so that we can have bigger rail cars getting in and out of that port area. So we've invested a lot of money. I would think it only makes sense that we try and capitalize and benefit from that investment by having Quonset reach its full potential, not its partial potential, but by reaching its full potential.
I'm so in support of that, Jim, and it's nice to see that Governor Chafee, I believe, is also in support of looking at Quonset and bringing it to its full potential. So hopefully something develops out of that over the next 2 years.
Okay. Well, we certainly hope so. And as we move on, other economic development issues are certainly going to be of vital importance to Rhode Islanders, particularly so many people who are underemployed or looking for work. Representative, I thank you for your time. I'm glad you found some time to come out and talk to us about these important issues of biweekly pay and the plant closings, as well as a little bit of the economic development issues. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Huh? that? Okay, right, okay. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. Thank you for coming. My name is George Nee. I'm the president of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and we are here today to show our support for the janitors who were fired at the AMICA Corporation up in Lincoln, Rhode Island several months ago. 25 janitors, given no notice, had some of which had worked there for 6 to 7 years. They had been working for a company that had a collective bargaining agreement with SEIU Local 615. After a difficult struggle, had been working under a union contract for 3 years. We are very concerned about this situation where workers who have achieved some level of decent wages, benefits, job security, and protection are just dismissed out of hand with no explanation, no notification. It's really not fair. It's a trend that seems to be happening across our state and our country, both in the public sector and the private sector. We are joined here today with representatives of a number of different unions that are here to show their support. Also, I'd like to acknowledge some state reps and senators that are here. Senator Metz, Representative Valencia, Representative Guthrie, Representative Williams, and we are going to hear in a minute from Senator Tassoni and also Representative Dickinson. This is really a struggle for people to maintain some level of community standards and some ability to have a standard of living that moves people out of poverty. The SEIU Local 615 has done a terrific job in this state, and we have a lot of good corporate citizens. Many of the larger corporations have been using janitorial firms that are organized. So this, for us, is a very alarming trend that a major corporation who the last time we checked seemed to be doing very well financially, all of a sudden decides that people become dispensable and they could just throw them out on the street and not worry about them. And we're saying that's unfair and that's unjust, and that we will bring that message to them. I also like to show some attention to a letter that will be going to Mr. DiMuccio later on today, signed by 47 members of the General Assembly, asking them very simply to reconsider this decision, to look at it again, and to do the right thing by working people and the people who had provided them with good service for the number of years that they did. At this time, I'd like to introduce Senator John Tassoni to say a few words. Senator.
Thank you, George, and thank you all for showing up today. The bottom line, this is corporate greed. This is corporate greed because these are hard-working people. And the issue of the firm that they hired has an unscrupulous reputation. They had issues pertaining a few years ago, and to throw these people out on the street is deplorable. But as George said, this is something that's going statewide, countrywide, and state by state. And it's unfortunate that has to happen again here in Rhode Island. And I'm not sure, and I'm absolutely positive, that if you look at the bottom line, AMICA Insurance has the money to pay these people. It's not all about people's pays and the job that they do. It's just simply corporate greed. So George, I want, on behalf of myself and the Senate, I want to thank you for having this press conference and showing some light to these hardworking people on a day-to-day basis. It's unfortunate what's happening to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. At this time, I'd like to introduce Francisco Solis. Francisco was the chief steward for SEIU Local 615. He had worked at AMICA for a number of years, and again, with little or no notification, was fired, and they brought in the other firm. So, Francisco?
Sí. Yo soy Francisco Solís, soy ciudadano y votante de la ciudad de Providence.
My name is Francisco Solis. I'm a citizen and voter for the city of Providence.
Primero quiero darle las gracias a los políticos, a la comunidad, por el apoyo que nos dan a nuestras familias.
First of all, I'd like to thank the politicians in the community for your support for all our families.
20 compañeros de trabajo y yo trabajamos limpiando los edificios de AMICA Insurance en Lincoln, Rhode Island.
Along with myself, there's 20 other co-workers that cleaned the offices of AMICA in Lincoln, Rhode Island.
En mi caso particular, yo trabajé 6 años, alrededor de 6 años.
I worked at AMICA for almost 6 years.
Pero hace un mes, AMICA, exactamente enero 22, decidió cambiar contratista de limpieza.
But a month ago, on the 22nd of January, AMICA decided to change contractors.
Con solo 2 días de noticia, todos nos quedamos sin trabajo.
With just 2 days' notice, all of us no longer had a job.
AMICA Insurance contrató una compañía que no ofreció trabajo, aunque fue un pedido que hicimos AMICA.
AMICA chose a contract, the contract that AMICA chose did not make an offer of employment to us, even after we had made that ask of AMICA.
Por años, mis compañeros, yo, sentíamos que estábamos limpiando una compañía, nos sentíamos orgullosos.
For years, myself and our co-workers, we were very proud of cleaning.
Limpiábamos una compañía que no era una compañía cualquiera.
We knew we were cleaning a business that wasn't just any business.
Era una compañía la mejor para nosotros, AMICA Insurance.
It was one of the best companies in the country, in the state.
Yo sentía mucho orgullo que estaba limpiando las oficinas de una compañía que es importante para el estado de Rhode Island.
I was proud to be cleaning for a business that was such an important business to the state of Rhode Island.
Nosotros trabajábamos duro porque, como nosotros lo veíamos, estábamos haciendo un servicio que de una manera u otra ayudaba a que AMICA saliera adelante.
We worked hard because we saw it in one way that we were providing a service that in one way was helping AMICA grow as a company.
¿Cómo es que ahora nuestro arduo trabajo en AMICA no siempre fue recompensado?
But our hard work at AMICA, like today, has not always been recognized.
Hace 3 años, el contratista AMICA nos pagaba menos del salario mínimo.
Just 3 years ago, the contractor at AMICA was paying us less than minimum wage.
No teníamos días de enfermedad, holidays.
We did not have any sick day or a holiday.
No vacaciones, no teníamos nada.
We didn't have no vacations at all.
En ocasiones teníamos que comprar los utensilios para poder hacer nuestra propia limpieza.
On occasion, we had to pay for our own equipment to do the job of cleaning the offices in AMICA.
Todo esto cambió
All of this changed
cuando decidimos tener unión.
when we decided to have a union.
Pero para ganar la unión,
But to win the union,
tuvimos que irnos un día a huelga
we had to go on a one-day strike
porque la compañía de AMICA no quería reconocer nuestros derechos como trabajadores.
because the contractor that AMICA was using did not want to respect our rights as workers.
Pero por primera vez la compañía era responsable.
But finally, the company was responsible.
Pero ahora AMICA ha decidido tomar pasos atrás
But now AMICA has decided to take steps backwards
y emplear a un contratista que no es responsable.
and to employ a contractor that is irresponsible.
Nosotros fuimos despedidos sin ninguna noticia.
We were all let go without no notice.
Ahora los trabajadores que están limpiando AMICA
Now the workers that are cleaning AMICA
están ganando el salario mínimo
are earning just minimum wage
con ninguna voz en el trabajo
without a voice at work.
y a lo mejor teniendo los mismos problemas o más problemas que nosotros tuvimos en el pasado.
And probably facing the same problems that we faced before at AMICA.
Mis compañeros y yo queremos la oportunidad de regresar a trabajar en AMICA
Myself and my coworkers want the opportunity to return to work at AMICA
para una compañía responsable.
for a responsible contractor.
Otra vez quiero darle las gracias
Once again, I'd like to thank
a los 47 políticos que firmaron esta carta
the 47 elected officials that signed on to this letter,
para AMICA y para todos ustedes quienes están con nosotros ahora.
and for all of you that are here with us today.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco, and I think you can see from the people who came out today from many, many sectors, unions in the labor movement, that we are a family, and right now you're in need, and we're going to stick by you, and we're going to fight with AMICA until they start treating these workers with justice. At this time, I'd like to call up Representative Dickinson to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. We are here today in sympathy, in compassion, and in brotherhood with a true spirit of unity with the men and women who benefit, who because of circumstances beyond their own doing have recently lost their jobs at AMICA Insurance. We care about them because they are our fellow Rhode Islanders. And we share the difficulties they are going through. But we also care about them because we care about ourselves. What is happening to them is a sign of danger ahead, and if we ignore it, we will do so at great risk. We are blessed to live in a society that is the fulfillment of the dreams of the Founding Fathers, the vision of a great country where every citizen has an obligation to work hard, to share our self-government, and when necessary, to take up arms in defense of our liberties. In return for fulfilling these obligations, it is the dream of our founders that every American would have the reward of a decent standard of living, the freedom to enjoy it, and the hope of a better future. During the last century in this great nation, there's no doubt in my mind that the primary means to our success in reaching that dream has been the right to organize and the right of collective bargaining. The great American middle class, the American people, whether they participate directly in collective bargaining or not, all of us have benefited from what at times has been nothing less than a struggle. Let me repeat that thought so there can be no doubt. If you are a productive worker who receives a decent wage, whether you take part in collective bargaining or not, you are reaping the benefits of those who participate in collective bargaining. As a student of history and of economics, I am sure of this. If you are a surgeon or a teacher or an assembly line worker, you benefit. Organized or not, you benefit. Today we all live in a rich country governed by a great middle class, very nearly the fulfillment of the dreams of our founders. But we also live in a time of new challenges, new dangers. There is trouble ahead, rough seas ahead. Our friends and brothers at Local 615, the AMICA workers, lost their jobs with 2 or 3 days' notice. Just 27 employees when a new contract was signed by AMICA. The effect of that decision was to remove a bargaining unit out of their facility. They may not even know that they were ejecting that unit. They may not even have had that as their main intent. They may not even care. But we do care. We do care. The 27 men and women, some of whom are standing here with us today, matter to us. They matter because every job lost impacts a life, a family, and a community. And they matter because they are the sign of trouble to come. Does what happened to these workers point to a deficiency in the law? Yes, it probably does, and that's something that we'll be addressing in this building. But what are the trouble to come? The troubling signs we saw when they were dismissed. We didn't have to wait long to find out. We barely left our rally in support of the Wisconsin workers when we learned on Sunday night that 1,926 Providence teachers would be fired, without the benefit of a hearing, without the benefit of due process. This was done in utter disregard of a school administrator and a teacher's representative who had been working together to develop a new model of collaborative problem solving. All of this against the backdrop in the evening news of brave young Egyptians and Libyans giving their lives to try to attain what we already have in this country. I ask myself, what is the mayor of Providence thinking? Is he looking for a cover of Time magazine, competing with the Middle East to get it? They want to keep the best teachers and maybe thin out their ranks. But what about the fact that the teachers, the chemistry and math teachers, the very best teachers, are the first ones who can and will seek and find employment in the private sector? Does he know about this? What is he thinking? And in fact, I know that those teachers are already starting to do that. And of course, you have to ask yourself, what about the expense of the inevitable long legal battle? What is he thinking? As we face the challenges and rough times ahead that are coming our way, we have to keep 5 things in mind. It is important that we keep our common sense and our goodwill and our memory of how we got here. It is important that we keep our humble determination and the spirit of unity. As I look at these AMICA workers dealing courageously with their own private problems, I sense that they have these qualities. Thank you to the AMICA workers for being here with us, for being the warning siren that we need to hear, and for being the inspiration that will guide us through the days and months ahead. Thank you, God bless you, and this great state and this great nation.
Thank you, Representative. I'd also like to recognize Senator Juan Pichardo, who's with us, and also Representative Bob Da Silva over there. Thank you very much for coming. At this time, our last speaker would be Representative Jay O'Grady from the great town of Lincoln, where just coincidentally, AMICA has their headquarters.
Well, thank you very much. I guess what I get for coming late is a tough act to follow, so I will keep my remarks brief after Representative Dickinson's heartfelt and remarks which were very inspiring. You know, I'm here today, was invited to speak today because the workers behind me are a group that I'm well aware of the history of and had a small part in that history. It was 4 years ago in 2007 when I became council president in Lincoln that a delegation of these workers came to the town council and testified before us that their rights were being systematically denied by their employer. They were, as you've heard earlier, not being paid minimum wage. Their rights to bargain and organize under the National Labor Relations Act were being denied. They appealed to us for some help, and in response to this appeal, the Lincoln Town Council adopted a resolution calling on all employers in the town of Lincoln to take an affirmative role in making sure that the contract employers that they were utilizing were providing the rights to their workers that were required under wage and labor laws. I'm happy to report that in the case of these workers, AMICA did just that. Through collaboration between these workers, AMICA management, and the contractor in question, these issues were resolved, the workers were compensated fairly, and their rights under the Labor Relations Act were ultimately respected. You know, when they visited the Lincoln Town Council 4 years ago, you could tell and you got the sense that these workers were nervous about being there. They were hesitant to be there. They were reluctant to complain about their treatment for fear that their jobs would be jeopardized. And while their recent dismissal may in fact not be related to those actions 4 years ago, I'm guessing that for all of the people behind me, it sure feels like there's a connection. And as Representative Dickinson alluded to, what hurts the most here is the suddenness with which these dismissals took place. And while I'm sure none of us ever want to lose our jobs, I think we all can agree that some adequate notice, some notice of maximum feasibility would be useful to all of us to prepare for a loss of income. And as Representative Dickinson alluded to, there are discussions about legislation that would provide such notice. You'll hear more about that in the coming weeks. And you know, thank you very much for speaking, for allowing me to speak here today. And we sympathize with your situation. Thank you very much.
Also like to recognize Representative Costa from North Kingston, who was with us. In closing, just want to say here publicly that we are committed as a labor movement, as representatives of working people in this state, whether they be union or non-union, to fight against injustice. We will continue that fight. That fight with AMICA started 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it will continue until AMICA reverses its course and goes out and hires a responsible contractor. We firmly believe that hard work should be rewarded. And the way that AMICA can prove that is to hire a firm that is a responsible contractor and give these hard-working people back their jobs. Thank you very much for coming, and if anyone has any questions, we're always available.
Not to be a fly in the ointment, George.
Yeah.
But if they change contractors now, won't the people who are working there lose their jobs abruptly?
You know, actually that would happen, but in this situation, we're dealing with people who had been there 6 to 7 years, who were thrown out on the street with 2 days' notice. It would be great if they doubled the workforce, and then everybody would have a job. But the reality is that 6 to 7 years has to count for something, or else everybody's in jeopardy every single day. We'll have a revolving door going on with workers in this country. Okay, thank you again for coming. Appreciate it.
I'm Andrew Schiff, the CEO at the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. We found it hard to believe that things could get much worse than last year. So many people unemployed and turning to us for food assistance. And then this year we've seen this incredible increase in the cost of both fuel and food. So people are finding it harder and harder to stretch the money they have to buy groceries, and more people are running out of money for food, turning to us for help. We've seen a 45% increase in the number of people coming for help in just 2 years. And trying to keep up with this, greater demand is really the problem that we face and the biggest challenge that we face. We need much more food coming into the food bank to be able to meet this need. We're statewide serving over 55,000 people each month, and they get served at emergency food pantries all across the state. These are our partners who are open during the week, on weekends, to try to make it possible for people who have run out of food to come in an emergency and get help right away. The face of hunger has definitely changed. We're seeing so many people who never needed food assistance before, have never needed food assistance in their lives, never thought that they would need help, and are now having to swallow their pride and turn to others for help. It's very, very difficult for them. But they're in this situation because someone in the family who is a wage earner has lost work, or they've had to take a job at much lower wages than what they were getting paid before. With less income, there's less money for food, and then we've seen the cost of living actually go up, so people just can't make ends meet. The Letter Carriers Food Drive is our most important food drive of the spring. It's a huge help at a time when typically we don't get a lot of food donations, so we really, really depend each year on this food drive. It's average around 200,000 pounds of food, which is a huge amount of food coming into the food bank right when we need it. And also, it's very, very high quality food. People are helping us by donating canned vegetables, canned soup, boxes of cereal, pasta, rice, and those are the core food, the most important basic foods that people need. I think the carriers know better than anybody just how tough these times have been for the community. And they're our heroes. I mean, they step up every year. They put in this tremendous effort and do this drive for us. It's on top of a huge workload that they already have on a Saturday when anybody else would be ready to end the week of work, but they go out and do this food drive for us on top of everything else that they do in their work week, and they make it so easy for people to donate. If you had a neighbor who didn't have enough money to be able to purchase food, you'd shop for them, you'd bring them a bag of groceries. Pretty much that's what this food drive is. People are able to provide a bag of groceries for a family in need, and that connection, instead of bringing it to your neighbor, the letter carriers bring that bag of groceries to us. They make the whole thing possible.
Thank you for joining us for this evening's edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen 3 times each week here on Channel 14. Join us on Tuesdays at 7 p.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m., and Saturdays at 5 p.m.